everybody, Josh Sigurdson, World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen. And I feel like some of our viewers have been watching us and going out on the streets and doing things about it, because we've been reporting on Wells Fargo for a long time, and as of recently, I'll just go over the headline for now. Wells Fargo interim boss faces taunts of fraud and criminals at Dallas meeting. And we'll go into the article in a moment, but I just find it funny because we've been talking about Wells Fargo for years, talking about their countless examples of criminality and fraud. And let's not forget that all banks are tied up in fraud and criminality by their very existence, thanks to legal tender laws, fractional reserve lending, them manipulating the economy, them spoofing markets, them fraudulently, in this case, creating fake accounts, giving or repossessing people's cars, repossessing people's houses. We went over a list of it before.
Yeah, not only that, Josh, you got to look at their litigation funds that every bank has, which is actually a fund that protects them against their fraudulent activities, that covers their cost of lawyers when they do criminal activities.
Yeah, well, I mean, the fact of the matter is we went over a video before talking about all of the different cases. Well, actually, to be fair, it was only about 20 of the cases out of like about 300 scandals that they've had over the last few years. And that might sound a bit high, but no, seriously, about 300 scandals just since like 2015. It's insane. But anyway, we also have to remember that they are giving people vast amounts of loans and pushing people into debt servitude right where they want people. They are working hand in hand with the government to push people into servitude, because if you're shoved down a bottomless pit of debt, you are forced to ask for a ladder up from the government and the banking system, pushing you right into servitude, like I said, right where they want you, and it puts you in a really terrible situation, because when you are desperate, you look to someone above you to help you up and give you a hand up, and unfortunately, the banks put you in those positions. But let's get into this article here. It says, C. Alan Parker was interrupted more than a dozen times during Wells Fargo & Co.'s annual meeting by activists who called executives frauds and criminals and demanded the interim chief executive officer turn the scandal-plagued bank around. And I quote, "Frauds, all of you," one heckler shouted as Parker tried to deliver his opening remarks in Dallas on Tuesday. "Wells Fargo, you cannot be trusted," yelled another. And I quote, "One of the wonderful things about shareholder democracy in this country is that we have meetings like this," Parker said, imploring the activists to hold their remarks until the time set for investor comments later in the meeting. Why should they wait? Why should they hold back? This bank is ruining so many lives, and I realize that personal responsibility comes into this as well, and people have to be smart enough not to get involved heavily in banks, but also it's just a fact that they knowingly fraudulently rip people's families apart, loan them more money than they can afford to pay back, and they know it. They are putting people in a terrible position, and they are causing just absolute havoc for countless millions of families. But getting back into the article, Wells Fargo's string of scandals began with the revelation that employees opened millions of potentially fake accounts to meet sales goals. Tim Sloan stepped down as CEO last month under mounting pressure from regulators, politicians, and investors. Parker is leading the company while it searches for a new top executive. Wells Fargo's shareholders have grappled with a change at the top twice since a fake account scandal erupted in late 2016 and led to the exit of CEO John Stumpf. After Sloan, a 3-decade insider, rose to the top job, issues continued to emerge across business lines. Regulators indicated repeatedly that the San Francisco-based bank hasn't done enough to clean things up. Sloan's successor may still inherit 14 outstanding consent orders and more than a dozen ongoing investigations. And Chair Betsy Duke said at Tuesday's meeting that the search for a new CEO is well underway and that the bank won't be giving any more updates on its progress until a decision is made. Board accountability. Shareholders and their representatives, both during their interruptions of Parker's remarks and the portion of the meeting reserved for investor comments, criticized Wells Fargo over the bank's sales practice scandals and board accountability. One attendee said she's a former employee and left Wells Fargo over corruption at the bank. Parker responded that changes have been made at Wells Fargo since the employee left to make sure inappropriate things do not occur at the bank. Oh, I'm sure they are just better at covering it up now. I mean, just imagine all of the hundreds of thousands of bankers throughout the world over time, over the last century, that have been involved in spoofing markets, and how many of them have been caught? How many of them have gone to jail? Think about it. John, what do you think about the constant scandals plaguing Wells Fargo, the fraudulent activity, and their attempt to push people into debt servitude?
Well, Wells Fargo is a fun place to be. Everybody should just get over there and hang out. Remember the collateralized sewage obligations that we we're talking about them issuing on their properties, and then just burn them down. Their properties, they make way more money than trying to survive in today's climate, because this bank is just appalling, and it's just ridden with scams and disgusting behavior of bankers, which is there's a lot of it out there. It's not just Wells Fargo, of course, but these this bank is ridden by it. And of course you got Mr. Warren Buffett is in there investing a lot of money, of course, in Wells Fargo. And he's been saying, like, oh, bad boys, like, try to change your ways. Meanwhile, he is probably one of the worst predators out there on Wall Street, taking over and do mergers and acquisitions, and then, just gutting the corporations of actual real innovation, real values, and then making money off of it. And that's what these guys are up to. They're just up to financializing markets, stealing from people, and of course stealing from people means that they're making a whole bunch of fake accounts, fake insurance policies. You could just go back and look at World Alternative Media and videos on Wells Fargo, just put in the two together, and you'll find that we've done quite the amount of videos on the topic, just covering all these crazy scandals. And of course, me and Josh, we've had several pictures that we've been posing in front of Wells Fargo. Remember the carriage that we posted in front of, I think, when we were on a trip in the United States, just to prove a point how disgusting and terrible this bank is. Now, I was mentioning at the start, Josh, the litigation funds that these banks have in order to protect themselves from these moments of appalling Ponzi scheme behavior that they put together here. But of course, they are just to pay off the people at the securities, at the CFTC. They're just to make sure that the government is going to stay out of the way and not intervene in their daily behaviors.
That's the thing. They work hand in hand with the government. What's the government going to do?
Yeah, and that's what I just
criminally responsible for more nonsense. I mean, look at this, John. I mean, we're talking about ways for them to protect themselves from the inevitable, which is that they will eventually go down. But just looking at their shares over the last 5 years, it's like jacked up and down, up and down. It's mostly in the red. And on top of that, it just looks like, if anything, lucky them, they can prop up their own shares. And we've talked about share buybacks and stuff like that. And on top of that, all the banks are bankrupt. And you've gone over in the past how their cash to deposit ratio is, many of them are down at like 0.5%, 1%, 5%, maybe 9% if they're lucky, but still most cash or most deposits aren't covered in cash, and it's crazy. And you tie this in with the fraudulent activity out of desperation that they are attempting everything from the cashless society to loaning crazy amounts of money and stocking up on debt, and then looking at the collateralized debt obligations, mortgage-backed securities, all that kind of stuff that they're getting involved in that we've seen before, that we saw back in 2007. It all adds up to one giant bubble, and it all adds up to them being inevitably doomed because of their own forms of central planning, their own criminality, their fraudulent activities. They are going down, and they know it, and they're doing whatever they can to scramble and prolong their life as much as possible. But, I mean, once you become a super centenarian, eventually it's going to happen, and you're on the doorstep, right? And you got to do whatever you can to prolong it if you want. But the fact of the matter is, Wells Fargo won't be around all that much longer.
Well, and you got to remember, if you take a look at, it's not just Wells Fargo. Look at Goldman Sachs is one of the worst performing stocks on the Dow Jones so far on a yearly basis. And then you take a look at other major banks around the world, and most of them are in the negative still. Actually, of course, in Germany, you got the two most troubled banks in the world, Commerzbank and Deutsche Bank. They are really struggling. Of course, Deutsche Bank is the worst by far. It's the third worst stock, except for Bayer and ThyssenKrupp, which actually ThyssenKrupp, that should warn people that a massive infrastructure company like ThyssenKrupp is in trouble here. But then, of course, Bayer, we all know why they are in the deeps, of course, with the stupidity of buying Monsanto, and then now got sued and lost a lawsuit on glyphosate, causing cancer. So they are in trouble. But then let's get back to the bank. So Deutsche Bank.
Well, I want to mention, before you get further into Deutsche Bank, John, I do want to mention something else from Wells Fargo here. As this Seeking Alpha article says, it says, with more earnings reports in hand, Wells Fargo is looking even worse. And the summary basically says that one of the first to report subsequent bank earnings reports have cast Wells Fargo's first quarter results in an increasingly negative light. Wells Fargo missed almost everywhere, including higher expenses and an unexpected reserve build. A new CEO is a necessary step in fixing the bank, but adds further uncertainty to the near-term growth outlook and the strategic plan. Wells Fargo still looks meaningfully undervalued if long-term core earnings growth approximates 3%, but there are still above average near-term risks. And no, I mean, they always try to sugarcoat it at the very end. They always put a little cherry on top, like it's going to distract us from the incredibly bearish nature of a bank whose time has come, a bank that is still part of the old guard, which is going down real fast as people innovate, as the markets innovate, as we move past the old banking system, because after all, people are starting to wake up and realize if your money's in the bank, it's not yours, it's the bank's. Why are you giving the banks your money? If you want to stay secure, stop being dependent on government and banks, again, who work side by side. You need to do whatever you can to protect your own purchasing power. But anyway, another bank we have been talking about a lot is Deutsche Bank, and there's a doomed bank that's trying to merge. Go on, John. Talk a bit more about Deutsche Bank.
Yeah, well, right before we go back to that, I want to show the credit default swap price for Wells Fargo. And as you saw, actually, on January 3rd in 2019, they hit a massive peak of just... Remember the calamity that happened back then, and of course Trump and Mnuchin and everybody comes back and is like, yeah, just calm down, guys. There's nothing wrong. There's no liquidity crisis here, and of course that's probably what it was. It's starting to really get into a lot of problems, and then now, of course, it's just a confidence game. They're just building up the United States empire still as the big player and the only player to be a safe haven in this world as a world reserve currency. That's what this is all about. This whole security. But let's just mention quickly about what happened over at in Germany, where two of the worst banks in the world, Commerzbank and Deutsche Bank, are hitting some serious stumbling blocks on the merger that they've been talking about in order to save Deutsche Bank. And of course, both of these companies, corporations, are not very well, worded. They have some of the worst derivative exposure in the world. Well, Deutsche Bank has. And of course, they're saying that this was all cost because there was a lack of investor support. And of course, investor support. Are you still investing in Deutsche Bank and in Commerzbank? Come on. If you invested in banks over the last years, you've actually been losing some money here, because these banks, they're very deep into the negative on a yearly basis right now. And of course, this just comes as another thing, hit them right in the face in 2018 when the guys like Jamie Dimon came out and called Bitcoin a scam. And then, of course, now he has his own shitcoin. Sorry for the language. He has his own coin, and it's called JP Morgan coin, and 5% of the JP Morgan financial transactions are now run on the blockchain.
Well, yeah, he was doing what he does best. He was spoofing markets in order to cause the price to go down, hopefully for him, so he could buy up cheap. It's the same thing as the Korean markets were doing during the bull market in 2017 with crypto, which, by the way, is looking to double their price in the near future by every trend. But also, I mean, it's interesting that this is all happening at the same time as Deutsche Bank begins a process of providing Trump financial records to New York's Attorney General, and they're trying to get involved in politics, and maybe they can get a nice, high five and a handshake in the back alley or something afterwards. If maybe someone will help them, because they know they're in a desperate situation. They know they can't last much longer.
Yeah, maybe they could rat out Trump or something. Who knows what the hell Trump has been doing with Deutsche Bank, and who cares about that?
Well, that's a funny part, though, John, because it's like they always go after banks like Deutsche Bank for, the banks go after people for hiding their money, quote unquote, money laundering, avoiding getting extorted. But then the banks do it themselves, as we saw with Deutsche Bank getting exposed in the scandal in the last year, the Danske Bank scandal. They are obviously involved in the same thing that they're reporting other people to the government for. It's just a vast hypocrisy.
No, of course it is, Josh. And if you take a look at, I did a massive report on all the debt, and I called it the web of debt. And there we found out that almost $2 trillion have been borrowed to the Cayman Islands from banks, commercial banks all across the world, and it's mostly American banks. So these banks, of course, they've created these tax shelters, which nobody other than the ultra wealthy is able to contribute to, of course. And there's no gains for us other ones. So that's why we got to use our new tax shelters like cryptocurrency to get out of the grasp of these governments around the world from stealing our money. In theory,
I must say, for legal reasons, in theory, doing that.
Yeah,
but,
of course
anyway.
It's theory, but it's just utter BS with the tax extortion that's going on around the world. Of course. And this has to stop. Of course, these banks are, getting pretty desperate because they're seeing what's coming, like the slow freight train now over the next 5 years with cryptocurrencies and mass blockchain adoption across the board. The banks are now desperate to, save their monopoly, which I don't think they will, because currencies like Bitcoin and others have positioned themselves to be able to be the mass adoption currencies instead of these fake coins and currencies, and of course the push for cashless crypto centralized by the central governments around the world. I think we're going to see all of these decentralized currencies win over the bankers, and they're kind of scared to their death, basically, because they are seeing their monopoly on money evaporate in front of them slowly. And it might not be very fast, but it's happening, and people are getting desperate. Now you're seeing pension funds sniffing at cryptocurrencies in order to actually protect themselves and have some kind of wealth insurance on top of maybe having some gold and silver. They are waking up to what we've been saying for years, Josh, and now we are seeing this adoption happening. And of course, with we could see all these banks just yell and be scared and do criminal activities. Who cares anymore? Let's just ignore them completely and just go around them and have a peer-to-peer type of system where we don't depend on these banks that steal our money, and when we have our money in the bank accounts, it's not yours. Come on.
That's exactly what I've been talking about as well for government in general. They're a shadow on the wall. You do not have to participate, break free. If just like 1% of us breaks free from that, the whole system collapses. And the free market always works better. The infrastructure that we could build on the blockchain, if properly decentralized, can easily replace that banking system. They know. That's why they're trying to get involved. That's why they're trying to co-opt the movement with their centralized coins that are absolutely ridiculous, and then also trying to fool the masses with stupid headlines and the usual limited hangout nonsense in order to confuse people so that they think that the cashless society that's being unrolled via legal tender laws by fiat is the same thing as decentralized, properly fundamentally useful cryptocurrencies and blockchain infrastructure technology. It's not. It's a very different situation, and it involves legal tender laws. It involves you actually owning your money and not it being in a bank and you basically lending your money to the bank with a very, very small amount of insurance on all that money that you lend to that bank. It's absolutely ridiculous. They are printing currency out of thin air, causing vast amounts of debt, and guess what? The taxpayer is extorted extorted while, these banks hide their money. The taxpayer is extorted in mass to pay off the interest on the debt. So think about that. Paying off the interest on the debt, blowing up children, making inefficient, infrastructure and bad roads that you get in car crashes after going over a pothole. Stop looking to government and banks for help and look to yourself. And I'll go into all the solutions in a moment, but first I want to take a break from the video for a second to mention to everyone that we are being heavily shadow banned like never before on YouTube, and we're reaching, like in many cases, 1 to 3% of our entire audience, and we are reaching about as many people with our videos as we did like 3 years ago when we had like 5% of the subscribers. So just make sure to check back, hit that notification bell. It might not even work, but still check into our channel as much as possible because we aren't able to reach people anymore. The shadow banning is crazy. They're not showing us on the side panels in most cases anymore. So it's getting really bad. But anyway, back to the solutions. There are more solutions than there are problems. And I have to say, I mean, with the amount of options, it comes down to individualism, not collectivism. It comes down to self-responsibility and financial stability, education, understanding this stuff. It's not as difficult as it looks, and it's not as boring as it looks. When you understand money, the establishment has tried to force everyone to believe that this is a boring subject matter because it's one of the most important subject matters to know in order to be free as an individual. So if you understand your money, you have control over your money. If you have control over money, you have control over your own lives instead of the people who create the money, who print the money, having control over your money and therefore having control over you. So we have to look at food, water, shelter, self-defense, or not gathering things for the toughest guy on the block, gold and silver as wealth insurance. This isn't investment advice. This is just our opinion. But nonetheless, look at history. It says a lot about gold and silver, especially with the gold-silver ratio that's happening right now. And we've done many videos on that as well. And then we also, like we mentioned earlier, cryptocurrencies, properly, fundamentally useful, decentralized, very important, decentralized and fundamentally useful cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology. And the privacy coins are probably going to be the best bet going forward into the long term, again, in our opinion. So there are many options, and I hope all of you guys understand that this is about what you do, not what someone else does for you. You must take charge of your own life, and you must break free from this system. It comes down to you. You're responsible for your money. You're responsible for yourself, and you need to prepare, and it's better to be over-prepared than under-prepared. Anyway, John, what's your final words?
Well, the final words here, let me try to make a quote out of this. But we actually got the choice between either we're going to sit on a totalitarian, technocratic, tyrannical, central cashless system, or we have the chance to have a complete individual freedom through free market cryptocurrencies and other currencies that could work together to give us that freedom back, and not legal tender laws through the scam that's government and of course the central banking system. Josh, that's all I got to say. There's nothing more to really say about this than this is our two choices between the futures that we want, and we got to make one very soon here.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to be shooting a documentary right away in Africa, so we need your help more than ever to keep this channel alive, because we will not be able to post as much as we usually do coming up very shortly. And we have a subscribe star page, which we will be doing subscriber-only content for $4.99 US a month and up. We will be doing subscriber-only content for, and you can put in more. You can tip the account and all that, less than $4.99, but that's just a tier where we start giving not safe for YouTube content, because YouTube is not allowing us to talk about certain things. And if we do, then they shadow ban us for like a month to make sure that we cannot make a cent, to make sure that we do not get seen. And even as we are watching subscriptions double in the last month, not this overall subscriptions, but the subscription rate coming in the last month has doubled, we are seeing the viewership for the last month cut in half. And it was cut in half from the month before that, and the month before that, and the month before that. So despite subscribers going up, views are going down because they are not showing subscribers our videos for the most part. If you saw a notification for this, if you saw it in your feed, I'm really happy to say you are one of the only people that saw it. You are one of the small percentage of people that saw it. So it shouldn't be 6 hours after posting a video, we reach 0.7% of the subscribers, that's to assume that every single viewer was a subscriber and not just a new viewer. So it's just getting really bad, guys. We need your help. We need your help to stay alive. We need to raise funds to keep this media up and running, because unfortunately it isn't as easy as it used to be. I wouldn't even care if we were just demonetized. We would find a way. It's a problem that we cannot reach people. We aren't able to actually reach our audience, and it's really hurting us. So I really hope that everyone checks out our subscribes to our GoFundMe, Patreon, Bitcoin, all those. We have Dash, Digibyte, I think, all that in the description as well. Just help us out any way you can. We really appreciate it. It keeps us alive and up and running. And if you want to know more about the financial system and all the issues surrounding that, also come out to the Red Pill Expo 2019, G. Edward Griffin's Red Pill Expo. Use the link below in the description. That helps us out. That saves you money. That helps everyone. And you get to see people like Robert Kiyosaki, as well as people like Del Bigtree. It's a vast different forms of topics and ideas that come to fruition at the Red Pill Expo. Anyway, you're going to hear an outro video right away that'll go over a lot of this again, but I think it's really important to just mention it as much as possible and emphasize it, because it's we're in an information war, and if we do not do whatever we can to save independent media, if not ours, Press for Truth, We Are Change, all the other independent medias out there, then we are going to stand by and watch as the independent medias burn and these mainstream medias try to monopolize themselves with government money, government funding, complete control of all of the major networks. And by the way, no, we cannot just completely leave YouTube, because then we'd be in an echo chamber and we wouldn't be able to educate anyone. So that's also a problem. But we are on lots of other platforms. John?
Yeah, no, that's it, Josh. We just gotta have to keep the flame alive here, not die out, because that's what we kind of saw after Trump got in. And it's interesting what we saw there, where people got very complacent for some reason. Especially the people in alternative media, they thought that Trump was the Lord and Savior, as the left thought with Obama, of course. So it's just this game that they're getting played, psychological played every single time, and they're losing it every single time because they're getting brainwashed by the government, and that's very unfortunate. And that's why we really need to wake up here and start to actually look at the truth, because we are not pro-Trump or pro-Obama or anything. We are actually pro-freedom here at World Alternative Media and most other alternative medias out there. We are actually looking at the real problems that are out in the world here, and of course they are not getting covered by mainstream media. They're getting distorted. They're getting different angles to try to make it look different, and that's really sad for journalism. And of course we got Julian Assange put in prison here, which is disgusting and despicable, and that's what we're heading towards here. If we don't step up and support people like us and a whole bunch of other people that are trying to tell the truth to people, instead of letting the mainstream media yet again gain control over this whole game, together with the banning and the use of government to control everyone.
Yeah, we have an opportunity to surpass that mainstream media narrative control with independent media if we stay true to supporting independent medias and the message of freedom and liberty and all of that. And I mean, it's a cyclical nature of political apathy that we see repeating over and over again through the centuries. It keeps one side apathetic or the other side apathetic. It's a perpetual nature of complacency, and it's the same thing. It's a Hegelian dialectic of problem, reaction, solution, repeat over and over for eternity. And it's gone back to ancient Greece. And when are we going to learn? When are we going to break free from that? Well, we have an opportunity in the age of information, if we keep it the age of information and not the age of disinformation. So let's keep pushing that forward. Thanks for going into all this with us, John. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth,
be the change.
Like what you see here, OM, don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so heavily demonetized and censored by YouTube, as these guys come in and flag all of our content as hate speech. The shadow banning is getting really bad, guys. Also, check our Bitcoin address right here on the screen or in the description below. We really appreciate it. And of course, check us out at the Red Pill Expo 2019. Of course, the great G. Edward Griffin and so many other incredible incredible speakers will be there. Our link for that is below as well. And we cannot forget Mike Maloney's goldsilver.com, which you can also find in the description. One of the greatest market and monetary historians out there. We really encourage everyone to check that out. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.
Bye.